Hey there, Russ here. Welcome back to the shop. I'm almost out. Anyway, I wanted to give you an update on my status of being self-quarantined. Follow up from the other day. It's now been it's been a week as of yesterday since I went into self-quarantine. It's working out pretty well. We have not broken, in my opinion, our self-quarantine status. As I see it defined, and all I can do is go by my own learning of what is going on. It's not necessarily the exact method or the best science, but it's what I know. I'll share what I know, and then if that helps you, great, but don't depend on mine to keep you safe, because you need to learn how to best be safe and follow those guidelines. If you get a chance, you should go read the CDC guidelines, just so you have some reference point of some of the things you want to be careful of. And this goes on whether or not you're going to just do social distancing, which everybody in the country is expected to do, or go into full self-quarantine mode like I have. And the reason I did that was because of my underlying medical conditions of both myself and you-know-who. Which brings me to my first thing I wanted to quickly discuss. Somebody asked me about being contaminated in the same household and that sort of thing. Remember one thing. If you're going to be quarantined and you're both quarantined, you follow what you think are the rules that you don't get the infection. You don't interact with somebody yourself or anything like that. If one is quarantined, you both are. Because you live in the same house, that also is the other way. If one of you is contaminated, you can bet the other one is going to be contaminated. So no matter how many people you have in the house, always you can assume that if one is contagious, it becomes contagious. Everybody in that house is contagious. That's what the government is saying, and you have to assume that. And everybody would have to completely quarantine for 2 weeks to be sure that they are now not infected, so that they can go out and not infect other people. So that's the idea behind it. So if you stay quarantined for 2 weeks and you go, I'm free, and you go out and about for one day and come back, just remember, you're not guaranteed to be not infected anymore, because you did break the protocol. The only way you know for sure that you didn't get contaminated is you have to continue that self-quarantine and follow all the strict rules to keep yourself self-quarantined. I think there's a little confusion about that, and I may be incorrect about it, but that's my understanding. If you have opinions or disagree with it, please leave the comments, because not only would I like to know, but everybody that watches this video, a lot of those people read these comments too, not just from me, but from everybody else. So don't be afraid to leave a comment. It helps everybody, because that's all this is about. You want to be aware of your condition, of where you're at. Try to avoid risky situations, and I did have one, and I'll talk about that in a second. But you should try to keep rubber gloves and a mask, if you can, by every exit of the house, which goes out beyond your protected area, your quarantined area. So that if somebody comes that way, you have rubber gloves and a mask you can put on to help minimize your risk while you interact. I had that happen, and that's the one thing I want to tell you. I thought of everything, but I haven't. I've seen some other things, ideas and things pop up, but I actually had a visitor unexpected. It was the mail person. They had a registered letter, and I had to deal with that and go out and sign the letter. I did go outside. I made sure I had gloves on. When I got done, I threw the gloves away immediately, carefully, and washed my hands. So hopefully I pretty much kept the protocol, and I kept a fair distance away, making them aware that I am in self-quarantine. So you want to make sure that if you're going to interact with somebody, also make sure they know that you are already self-quarantined and that you want to protect yourself from any outside infection. So, which brings me to, I was thinking about a sign the other day, so let's do a little humor. At least we get something out of this that isn't all bad news. I was thinking about hanging a sign out there that says, so that people know that I am self-quarantining. So I run this by you-know-who. She didn't like it, so maybe you will. But the sign would say, this house is under self-quarantine. This includes me, my big dog, and my 357. Enter at your own risk. So, for some reason, she didn't like that. So, anyway, I don't know what you think, but I thought that was a cute sign. And if you see it anywhere else, you can say you heard it here first. So, because I'm sure those jokes are going to start coming out too, especially once this is over. So much for light humor. The other thing I want to say is that, I think I already said that assume that if you are infected, everybody in the house is infected, and you have to treat it accordingly. So if one person breaks the protocol of being quarantined, nobody is quarantined anymore. You have to start over to make sure you reach that point where you know there is no contamination. But you can still get contaminated, and once you do, you can still spread it, even though you're quarantined for that 2 weeks. That doesn't mean you won't never catch it again. The only way that I understand that happens is if you actually catch it and survive it. Then you're kind of immune to it to a certain extent. And even then, I understand that's not 100%, but I don't know for sure at this point, and I don't think they do, that this is still a pretty new virus. So anyway, just remember that about that. I do try to give, and I talked about this with somebody too, I try to give my packages that come in my mail, I try to give them at least a 24-hour quarantine on their own. 48 is better. For packages, we've been going 48. Now, some of the mail, because of what she does, she can't wait too long, so she doesn't do that. But it's a good idea. Excuse me. It's a good idea to quarantine all incoming packages if you can. I've heard people say that they unbox them and everything outside and leave the box outside, but if there's a problem with it, the boxes inside can be contaminated from whoever packed the box, if theoretically they had the virus. So the only way you really can be sure, and they say cardboard up to 48 hours, so any packages I get from somewhere, they really should sit for 48 hours, is my opinion. I don't remember about the guidelines, what they say about that or not, but again, the CDC guidelines, they're worth you reading. If you haven't, they're boring, but you should read them at least once, so it helps you get some ideas of some of the things that will help you to figure out what to do and not do somewhat. So you might want to keep that in mind. The last thing I want to talk about real quick here is a support person. I talked about this the other day when I told you I went to self-quarantine. I'm very lucky because I have now 2 support persons. They're both young, in a low-risk group area, and they're willing to help me. I made sure I made contact with them and that we talked about how to do it. We made sure we went over the procedures of they drop things off and then I will get them and that sort of thing, and how we pass things back and forth that has to be taken out and brought in. And so you want to make sure you get support people. If you don't have anybody, call your church. Call your village, call your city people and see what they say about looking for support people. Look online where you can find anybody. There's one in New York now, and maybe if you contact them, if you don't have anybody for support, contact them and maybe they can help give you an idea of who you can. But most importantly, you really truly should get yourself a support person, whether you need them at this point or not. If you're social distancing and you have that support person ready to go, if something happens and you got to self-quarantine or something has to be done that's really too risky for you to do, they might still do that for you. So it's a good idea to have somebody like that lined up. That subject has come up once or twice, and I listened to it on the news and to the briefings at the White House about that and about how they talk about support people. So you really, truly, if you're going any chance of being that way, you want to try to figure out somebody that's less distancing than you are, because there are many of them out there that don't have the risk factor that I do and that possibly you have. So keep it in mind. Support people are really important to make those contacts and start those relationships now rather than wait until you absolutely have to have it. It's a good idea. So those are my thoughts. I hope they help you. Like I said, this isn't an exact authority here. I'm not. I'm just trying to get by myself under my own self-quarantine that I have decided to move myself into and how it's going for me. So any suggestions, ideas, comments, leave them below because my viewers would probably appreciate reading them as much as I would. If you learned something here, you like this video, hit that like button. It lets me know that what I'm doing is the right thing. Most importantly, please come back again because I'm nowhere near done. Thanks, and we'll see you again soon.